Hello again, friends and fellow truth seekers. Mike Nicholas here with another episode of the Soul Unleashed podcast, where my goal is to help you break out of old paradigms, ask the right questions in your search for a deeper meaning for your life, and help you shift from a spiritual skeptic to a free thinker. Let's dive in with today's adventure. Hello, friends. When I was about 6 years old, I remember I went to a Catholic school in Mount Ephraim, New Jersey, Sacred Heart School, and it was a good school, I think. I was only 6 years old, but I was in first grade, and I remember it was Holy Week, and we were taken to the auditorium, and we watched a film on the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And all I remember from that experience is when they put his arms down on the cross and they were driving these stakes through his wrist, and there was blood gone everywhere, and it was incredibly lifelike. And to a 6-year-old, I think I was probably, traumatized to some extent. That was the first time. I'd seen the crucifix and Jesus hanging on the cross and everything, so it wasn't completely unusual, but that was my first introduction to really what the crucifix meant and crucifixion meant. And I bring that up because I started wondering the other day how we are introduced to spirituality when we're young. And what started this whole thing was I was listening to a podcast by two very entertaining women. That both of them are mediums. And they were talking about, they were raised in the Catholic faith, but that has changed since they got more into spirituality. But one woman said that she had just recently given her son a totem animal. And he was 7 years old, and he was bonding with this totem animal, and I guess it offered him protection and a sense of security and comfort. And she was encouraging him, of course, to do that. And she had her own totem, I guess, that she used. And she was careful to say that you don't call it a spirit animal. That spirit animal, that term, is considered cultural appropriation. And so we don't use that term, and we use instead totem animal. But anyway, it initially struck me as weird, strange, I guess. Hearkening back to my mental state maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when I approached everything through the lens of what I'd grown up with and was not really much interested in spirituality. So my first thought was, what the heck is a totem animal? And how the heck does that work? And so I did a little bit of research on it, and that's how I came to understand that it's a pretty common practice in many indigenous cultures, not only here in North America, but other parts of the world, Africa, especially South America, and that this is a very serious practice as part of their faith, that they bond with a specific animal, and in the qualities or characteristics of the animal, such as courage or fortitude or perseverance, whatever qualities they associate with that particular animal, whether it's an eagle or a bear or a lion or some type of animal like that, that's important to them. So I've come to accept that a little bit better, or a little bit more. I also have some wonderful, lovely neighbors whom I like very much, and they're wonderful parents. They have 3 beautiful children. They invited me to a ceremony recently, and it was a Pokemon selection ceremony. Now, I had never heard of that either, so I had to do a little research, and they were letting their daughter, she's 1 year old, pick out her Pokemon character. And again, I had to do a little research. Apparently, the whole Pokemon culture or Pokemon world has to do with a very intricate way of picking Pokemon characters, and things happen to them and they mature and they develop. And when I did some research on the internet, I thought, well, maybe it's all a bunch of nonsense, and it's just a game. And it is a game, but it's a lot more than that. A lot of people take it very seriously. I can't criticize it. I won't criticize it because I don't understand it. And from what I read, there's a lot of positive qualities that come out of it in terms of teaching people valuable lessons and the value of transforming from one thing to another. I think that's the lesson that the Pokemon adventure or Pokemon journey teaches. So anyway, that was my first couple recent introductions to introducing children to spirituality. For me, growing up Catholic, I just assumed that it was all about saints and angels and those kind of things. I remember also as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old in Catholic school praying before a large picture of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And, that picture, his heart is exposed. And I remember, I don't think I was traumatized, but I remember thinking, man, that's, unusual. And, you just accept it as a kid. Another thing that I was taught very early on was the value of spirits like angels. So my first grade teacher was a wonderful woman named Sister Donald Elizabeth, and she taught us to leave room in our little wooden seats for our guardian angel. In those days, it wasn't the 1800s, but it was close. In those days, we had wooden desks, and they're kind of you raise the lid up, and it's still the inkwell in the corner, but it had a little wooden seat attached to it. And that seat, we had to leave half available for a guardian angel. So she really introduced me to the concept of I always had a guardian angel with me. And of course, my name being Michael, I was also taught early on that September 29th of each year was the feast day of Saint Michael. And so he was my special protector and someone in whom I was very, very interested and took great pride in having the name Michael and the Archangel Michael and fighting the devil. And that was all part of growing up. But that was my experience as a Catholic, as a Christian. And I think for many other Christian children, it's whatever you're taught as a child. And our church, for example, the church that we now, my wife and I, we attend church online because, as many of you know, she's in the hospital and she can't get out of bed, but we watch online Mass. In the church we watch, every Sunday at 10 a.m. Mass, they bring the children forward and they send them all downstairs. And I know many Protestant denominations do that also. And the children go through some form of instruction in their faith, whether it's saints or angels or Jesus Christ or learning about the Bible. And they're introduced to spirituality at their age through that perspective. But I would certainly say that throughout the world it's different. So the point of this podcast was to ask the question, are totem animals something that concern you, or have you ever heard of totem animals? And that's how I got off on this tangent is, what does a kid who believes in totem animals think about religion? Now, I will say that in the absence of Christian doctrine, there's going to be probably a lot of different things that might surprise you. I was surprised recently talking to a young person, and I asked him what he thought of heaven and hell. And this is relative, so it wasn't too weird. And he said, I don't believe in hell. And he was a teenager, not much of a teenager, 14 years old. But he said, I don't believe in hell. And very matter-of-factly, which kind of set me back. And I thought, how did he come up with that particular point of view? But then I came to understand that his upbringing was not something where it was very Christian-oriented or, heaven and hell, judgment, fire and brimstone, the Bible kind of thing. And so he didn't say anything about totem animals. I asked him if you've ever heard of that. He said no. So whether it's totem animals or whether it's Pokemon or whether it's Jesus Christ and the Bible, your children are going to be introduced to some form of spirituality at a young age. And if you completely ignore it and go with the aspect of, well, they'll just figure things out on their own and let them decide, because I know some parents that do that. They don't want to, in their opinion, foist anything on their children. To me, that's kind of an abdication of your responsibility as a parent. But some people do that, right? They decide that they want to let their child pick what they want to do and or believe. And the problem with that, of course, is that somebody's teaching them something, and most likely they're picking things up in school from other children. And so even if it's a totem animal, at least I think it's a parent being proactive in terms of trying to impart some type of spirituality guidance to their child. So totem animals, Pokemon, whatever it is that you believe in, I just got carried away with that particular concept, listening to it because it seemed odd. And then the more I thought about my experience growing up and the things that I went through, it's just because of my upbringing and the Catholic school. And to a lot of people, Jesus being nailed to the cross and blood going every place, or the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the heart being exposed, that probably seems a bit much or strange. But hopefully we're all going to the same place in terms of source and God and love. And I talk about this in my book also, that I think that this is heresy in the Catholic Church, honestly, but there are many paths to the right place. There's not just one path. Now, Christians, of course, listening to this would disagree with me and say that, Jesus Christ said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And the only way to heaven or to the Father is through him. I'm just not sure that, in my humble opinion, that we understand that fully. So I think there are different ways to the truth, different ways to the source. And as long as it's wrapped in love, and the main concept is love, that it's a good thing. So thank you for listening. That's just a short podcast for this week. Again, spurred by the totem animal thing. And if you've got any comments about totem animals or other unusual spiritual practices, good things that children are going through, and you want to share them in terms of comments on this podcast, I'd appreciate it. And if you get the chance to leave a review about the podcast, it helps other people find me. I appreciate it. Thank you, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Bye-bye.